Hello and welcome. Today we'll be talking about a trio of prickly nightshades and going over the similarities and differences between these three species. The one we'll start with is the most charismatic, with the bearing the scientific name Solanum pyracanthum, or fire thorn. As you can see, this nightshade is particularly noteworthy in coloration, with leaves that are a light green, almost teal color. This is quite distinct among the genus, to my knowledge. The leaves appear to be slightly fuzzy in the right lighting, but tend to feel smooth. And the most distinctive aspect of this plant is, as you can see, it bears a number of brilliant orange thorns. Both top and bottom of leaf possess these spines, and they start to develop on even the smallest ones. Likewise, the plant's stems and inflorescences also bear spines. Now, this plant is good to illustrate what the spines are, because as you can see, the stripe on the leaf has a similar red coloration, and this is because the spines are modified leaf hairs. So they are a trichome made large and then hardened into a point so as to deter the plant from being consumed by herbivores. And as you can see, the inflorescence is also covered in the rusty colored hair. The flower of this plant, which this one's slightly wilting, so my apologies for not having a good one, but the flower is a vibrant purple coloration with 5 petals, 5 bright yellow anthers, and a single pistil. This is very colorful for a nightshade, which is unusual because most nightshades, and Solanum in particular, tend to be rather bland. And it's also a relatively warm weather plant because it hails from Madagascar, whereas oftentimes you'll find nightshades growing in cooler climates. A particularly convenient trait of this species is that they reproduce from the roots, which in turn provides a number of easy ways to propagate them. Other Solanum, some but not all, don't do this. The flowers, after being pollinated, will begin to produce a berry like this. The berry starts out fairly white in coloration, and then it will turn green upon being ripe. Pollination is successful with only a single plant, but it requires the flower to be shaken in order to pollinate it properly. So this would be performed by bees in nature. Solanum offer only pollen. There is no nectar to speak of, so bees are only after the pollen here. And in captivity, I have heard of people using toothbrushes to release pollen, as well as various other technologies to aid in the plant's reproduction. The fruit has a most disagreeable flavor. It is a cloying, bitter taste that refuses to leave your mouth. About half an hour afterwards, you'll still be feeling the plague, and this is because it has a level of toxic alkaloids. Now, I have seen somebody on other social media, I'm assuming TikTok and Instagram, talk about how this fruit would kill you if you were to eat it. This isn't true. One of them, and even a fair number of them, would make you moderately sick at worst. The reason he said that they're fatally dangerous is because he's a, short form video is lonely and craving attention. And you shouldn't believe the poisonous reputation of nightshades, because in most cases it is exaggerated. If you were to eat this plant, and it were to kill you, it would almost certainly be from stab wounds due to the numerous prickles this plant bears, and not its toxicity. If you can manage to eat a poisonous level of this plant without expelling it due to its absolutely horrific flavor, that would be impressive and very deliberate. I'm not certain it's even possible. Solanum pyracanthum here grows to a height of approximately 5 or 6 feet, and it can live for several years, though it isn't winter hardy. The same cannot be said for the next plant we're going to talk about, which is a South American cousin, Solanum atropurpureum. The scientific name of this plant, atropurpureum, refers to a deep purple, and as you can see, compared to pyracanthum, this plant's stems are very dark, and they're covered in a much larger number of deep purple thorns. Some stems, which remain green, still bear the purple spines. The leaves of this plant are deeply lobed here. They are slightly larger than those of pyracanthum, and like pyracanthum, they have hardened trichomes, in this case a purple and white coloration, to aid in its defense. Now, unlike pyracanthum, atropurpureum here is indeed winter hardy and can survive temperatures down to about 14 degrees Fahrenheit, which can pose a risk because they are able to establish themselves, and one would want to ensure that they don't become invasive. The flower of this plant is much smaller than in the case of pyracanthum, and is a boring white color with, again, yellow anthers and a single pistil. Like pyracanthum, it requires buzz pollination to successfully reproduce, and like all Solanum, it has no nectar to speak of. As you can see in this flower, if it were to focus, is an interesting trait where the petals have a slight green splotch on the base, and this has evolved to protect them from ultraviolet light by absorbing the UV that would be reflected into the anthers and risk damaging the pollen. This plant does bear a higher toxin load than Solanum pyracanthum does, and if the flowers are pollinated successfully, they will turn into these kind of white and green marbled fruit, which upon maturity will turn orange, and they're likewise incredibly disgusting to the taste, and I don't recommend eating it, both for poison reasons and just because if you have no reason to put something that horrific in your mouth, you shouldn't. This plant can reach about 2 meters in height, although I've never seen one do so. The most height I've ever seen from this is about 3 feet. And, unlike pyracanthum, which is very branchy, this one is not. This plant hails from mostly Brazil, I think, but other South American regions have been known to have it as well. And finally, we have another South American plant to talk about. This one is Solanum quitoense, also called the naranjilla, and unlike the other two plants I showed you, Solanum quitoense, the ense suffix of its scientific name indicates a location rather than a physical trait. As you can see, like atropurpureum, it bears purple thorns upon its leaves. It has a deep purple grooving to the veins, and if you zoom in right on the leaf's edge, you can see that it is covered in a number of fine hairs that sometimes bear a purple coloration to them, and in bright light the leaves get a sort of purple aura about them due to these fine hairs, which also give them a velvety feel. Also, unlike pyracanthum and atropurpureum, Solanum quitoense is edible and is cultivated for food in much of South and Central America. The leaves are velvety soft, and the fruit, upon maturity, turns bright orange with a thick layer of fuzz upon it, which, once removed, reveals a fruit that tastes somewhat like a tomato, but also with a bit of a citrusy flavor. The flowers of this species, if I can find one, don't seem to be any open today, but there are flower buds here. The flowers are white, but they have a much thicker petal and much larger anther than either of the two species I've shown you, which is unusual. I'm not entirely sure what causes the more robust flower, but it's worth noting. The leaves of quitoense reach quite a large size. This one is nothing compared to what I've seen the plant do toward the end of the summer, and they are very sparsely lobed. This plant, while probably the least noteworthy in appearance, is by far the most common in cultivation, and it prefers fairly cool climates and doesn't usually flower without relatively cool night temperatures. Although in this case, this one seems to have acclimated to northeastern summer and is okay with flowering in warm climates. Usually there's two varieties of this plant. One of them doesn't have thorns, and this is the one that's usually more warm hardy, because it's the one that gets more commonly cultivated. The leaves have long petioles, which are bright purple. It doesn't tend to branch very often, unless it is damaged, and as this older branch, should it focus, will show you, they have some spines upon their stems, but not nearly so many as the other two. In all cases of these plants, the three species, getting spined by them while they're actively growing is not the main concern. See, the leaves have some give to them, they can bend, and this often protects you from the worst of it. When the leaves fall off, though, and dry up, they curl, and then they become a sort of caltrop-like structure that makes approaching the plant hazardous. I have made the mistake of stepping on one a few times, and they will quite readily lodge themselves in a human foot. It rivals the stinging tree in terms of pain until it's pulled out, and it's overall not an experience I would recommend, so I like to keep the pot clean as much as I can to avoid leaves from piling up. So that's all I have to say about this group of nightshades, quitoense, atropurpureum, and pyracanthum. I hope you will join me for the next video, which is probably going to be about carnivorous plants, though if it isn't, it might be about another nightshade which is devoid of spines. And if it's not about that, it might be about my area of expertise, which is the sister of Solanum. They're also nightshades, but they're very different than the Solanum genus. That's all for today. Thank you and have a good day.